Welcome to my Tuesday blog series, Beyond the Books, The Language of Success. This is in addition to a podcast which will feature guest interviews on the importance of literacy. Today is part 4, the factors involved in producing a higher percentage of high school graduates state by state. In my last literacy blog, the idea was expressed that the rate of pre-K education for 3 and 4-year-olds produced a higher percentage of high school graduates. However, that is just one of the mitigating factors. This week, we will examine several factors that determine the high school graduation rate. The percentage of 3 and 4-year-olds in pre-K education, the percentage of high school graduates, the percentage of childhood poverty, state ranked population, the percentage of ethnic diversity, and the dollars spent per pupil per state. Idaho, Indiana, New Hampshire, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana all had 0 pre-K attendance, but they still had a high school graduation rate of 89.3 to 94%. Indiana had the lowest rate of high school graduates, spent the least on education, had the highest rated childhood poverty, and considerably more population, and less ethnic diversity. New Hampshire, Wyoming, and Montana had the highest percentage of graduates, paid the most per pupil, and lower population. In the states having 2% to 9% pre-K attendance, Mississippi, Nevada, Rhode Island, and Alabama have a high school graduate rate in the 80 percentile. Mississippi grossly was underfunded and had a high childhood poverty rate. Nevada was also underfunded. Rhode Island was the highest in the 80th percentile, had small population, was well-funded, and had a low childhood poverty rate. Alabama only had 80.4% graduation rate and spent largest amount per pupil. However, the population is small, the travel expanse great, and many different languages. Only 84% speak English. 90 percentile all spent above average except for Utah, but education is very important in the Mormon religion, which might account for the 93%. In the 10 to 19% pre-K attendance, Tennessee, North Carolina, Alabama, Illinois, and Louisiana spent under $10,000 per pupil, with the exception of Illinois, which has population very high and very diverse. Oregon, Delaware, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Colorado, Kansas, Connecticut all reached the 90th percentile for grads and spent over $10,000. Colorado and Connecticut had low rates of childhood poverty at 9.27 and 9.35, while Alabama and Louisiana had high childhood poverty rates at 14.96 and 18.56. In the 22 to 28% pre-K attendance, all in the 80th percentile were underfunded with the exception of New York, which spends twice as much money as the average amount, but with only an 87.2% graduating rate. It is very diverse with many different languages in the student homes. California has the same language issues, but spends half of what New York does. Texas and California also have large populations and language differences, with both being underfunded and higher childhood poverty. Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Nebraska, and New Jersey have graduates in the 90th percentile, low childhood poverty, and are well-funded. In the 30 to 79% pre-K attendance rank, Georgia, Florida, Oklahoma, and West Virginia were in the 80th percentile and underfunded with a high childhood poverty ranging from 13.24 to 17.01. Iowa, Wisconsin, Montana, and Vermont all were in the 90th percentile of grads, had low childhood poverty, and a good percentage of pre-K education. The District of Columbia had 79% pre-K attendance, 91.9% of graduation rate, a high childhood poverty rate, but also was the second highest funder in all of the states. In summary, a larger percentage in the pre-K attendance almost always mitigates a low funding per pupil. All states that spent $12,000 or more per child had a high school graduation rate averaging between 90.3 and 93.6, with the exception of California, Illinois, Rhode Island, Alabama, and New York, with California and New York having large, very diverse populations. Rhode Island had very little pre K. When the childhood poverty rate is under 11%, 20 out of 22 high school graduates were in the 90th percentile. When higher than 13%, 13 out of 16 high school graduates were in the 80th percentile. States with higher populations were more likely to be in the 80th percentile, smaller populations more likely to be in the 90th percentile. Lower ethnic diversity tends to produce high school graduates in the 90th percentile, whereas those with higher diversity produces more grads in the 80th percentile. More diversity often means that there are language barriers, such as non-English speaking parents and parents who are unable to read to their small children.